Hi everyone. Now that I'm done grading your papers and I've returned those to you, and since I'm done grading your first set of assignments related to the synthesis essay, there's a few things I want to go through with you that I'm hoping will help you succeed in the next unit, and that I just want to cover about the last unit. And I didn't want to write you a really long email. I figured it'd be easier to understand if I put it in a video form. And so I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can because I don't want this to be too long, but I want to cover some important things. So, number one, I know a lot of you may feel frustrated with your grade. We had a lot of A's and a lot of really high B's on the last paper. However, some of you may feel frustrated with your grade. I want to go over a couple of things with you. First of all, it was a harder paper. So if you, for example, got a 90% on the first paper and a 90% on the second paper, you should think of that as improving because it was a much harder paper, okay, and a lot harder skill set, okay? Sorry, my brain is fried after a day of grading. And number two, if you didn't get 100%, that's just things that we're going to work on as we move forward. The class is not over. It's close to over. We're 2/3 of the way done, but we are not done, and we still have a bunch to cover, and you still have a lot of opportunities to learn, okay? Importantly, a lot of you who didn't get A's, it does not mean that your paper was not an A paper. In a lot of cases, there were people who had A quality writing, and then something really silly brought the grade down, like, for example, not having an introduction or not having a conclusion or forgetting the thesis. And so you had like an A quality paper that didn't get an A because it was missing something or missing more than one thing. So I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to know that when I say that there was a section of your paper that was really, really good, I'm not saying that just to fluff your ego. I'm trying to point your attention to what you did well so that we can try to do that more. Okay, we now have one paper ahead of us, and you get to practice a lot of the same skills. So unlike paper 1 to paper 2, there is much more similarity between paper 2 and paper 3. So you get a chance to really hammer out the skills that maybe you didn't get right on the first try. Now, I want you to know that no matter what you got on the first paper, that does not automatically mean you cannot get an A in the class. If you're doing the discussions and you're doing the writing tests and you're doing the quizzes and you're not getting an A on the paper, it does not mean that you cannot have an A in the class. Okay, there's still plenty of things to be graded. I am going to assess you as a whole at the end of the semester. Just take it with a grain of salt. As I said in an earlier video, I can't lie to you about your grade because it's not going to help you learn, right? So if you wrote a B paper, I have to explain to you why it was a B so that hopefully we can actually get you to a place where you're writing an A paper rather than telling you this is an A paper and then you just think, oh, I'm an A writer and I'm an A writer, and when you're actually maybe a B writer, right? So as a writing teacher, I don't want you to have good grades that don't mean anything. I want you to actually become a stronger writer. And so many of you are improving. And I just want to clarify that so many of you got A's and high B's on this paper, but I have experience with students in the past who just get really frustrated when they don't get 100% on every essay, and I just want to address that. Okay, there's two things that a couple of people were confused on the last paper that we're going to work on in the next paper that I want to go over. So number one, there were a few people that didn't have very strong summaries. So I want to remind you guys that a summary has to go over the main idea of the text that you are summarizing in the first sentence and give the name of the text in the first sentence. So from the very first sentence of the summary, I should know what the whole argument was about, okay? And it's not enough that you say this person talked about this and about that and about this, right? So I can't say, oh, they talked about student success and about FIU and about graduation rates, right? Because if I just say about this and about that, about this, the person who's reading it who has never listened to the TED Talk or read the article or read the book is not going to know what that means. Whereas if I say, you know, in this text, Carol Dweck argues that students who believe they can improve have a tendency to improve faster than students who believe that you have to be born with ability. And that sentence tells me everything I need to know about that argument, right? Carol Dweck argues in such and such text that, and I understand the main argument. And then in the next couple of sentences of the summary, I would go over some of the big ideas in the text, right? She spent like 10 minutes on this part, so that was probably really important. Or she spent 2 pages or 2 paragraphs on this, so this was probably really important. And I go over some of the most important ideas. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that the person who's reading my summary can understand the text without having to read it themselves. So you don't want to find yourself saying things like she talks about X and she talks about Y. What does she argue about X, right? So you should be saying things like she or he argues, he or she explains, okay? So that we know what the talk was about. In the next paper, you are going to have to write summaries. So I'm looking for some improvement for some of you on the summary skills. Summaries are very important. You will have to write summaries in your time in college. So this is a skill you should develop. Okay, one of the other things that I said on a lot of papers that is going to be repeated on the next paper is the example structure. There was more than one student in the class who had a topic sentence and then gave an example, an example, an example, and then an explanation at the end of the paragraph. I want to remind you guys that you have to explain your examples between examples. So, for example, if I'm saying, Carol Dweck used good pathos, I need to find an exact moment in the text where she used good pathos. And I can't just sort of gesture wildly and say, oh, there was plenty of times where she used pathos. I have to actually say, here's something she said. And then after I give that example, I have to explain, and this was pathos, and it was effective because. And then I give another example of pathos. Here's something else she said that was pathos. And then after I give that example, I say, this was pathos and it was effective in a different way than the first example, but it was still effective because, and I keep going back to like, this was pathos and it was effective. This was pathos and this was effective because that was my topic sentence. Now in the synthesis essay, you're going to have topic sentences that are going to be like, so-and-so agree, so-and-so disagree, and you're going to need to give an example from one article and then an example from the other article. And again, you're going to have to keep explaining why they agree with this statement you're saying. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But it doesn't matter what your topic sentence is. Whenever you're giving examples, it doesn't matter if it's for a psychology class, if it's a history class, if it's in an email. Whenever you tell someone, for example, let me point out an example for you. After you give the example, you always want to explain to them, your reader or listener, why you gave that example, what you think that example shows. So some of you didn't quite do that. You either didn't have very specific examples, you were just sort of gesturing wildly at the text without actually pointing to like an actual sentence, or you were pointing to specific sentences but not always explaining why you think why this supports your topic sentence. So I want you to work on that for the next paper too. Okay, back to the point I was just making. On your synthesis essay, when I was grading the assignment that was due on Tuesday, and I told you guys to look at Donovan's and I think Alvaro's example, the reason I did so is because a lot of you were like, oh, both of the articles talk about people staying at home. And again, that sneaks back in, right? They talk about X. They talk about whatever. That is not telling me what they argued. And so for the synthesis, you need to zoom in a little bit more and say, this is what they argued that was similar, right? And I made a video on this, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail. But for example, you might say, this article argued, both of these articles argued that sometimes children have to move in with their parents for financial stability after graduating college. So that is a link I'm making between both articles, and I could write that as a topic sentence, and then my paragraph would be proving that both of these small little articles agree that students do have to move back home for financial reasons. I could also say one difference between them is the first one kind of says parents need to find ways to set limits, and the second one says that the responsibility is for the government to figure out how to support these people. And that's a difference because one is putting the responsibility on the parents and one is putting it on the government. And that could be a topic sentence in a synthesis essay, and I could write a whole paragraph on that because I'm trying to find similarities and differences in their arguments, okay? Now, for the examples and explanation of examples, if I wrote the first paragraph where I was saying, okay, they both agree that students have to move in after college for financial reasons, I would take a quote from the first article, and then afterwards I would explain, since my topic sentence was they both think that students have to move back in after college, I would explain why this quote shows that this author believes that students have to move back in after college. And then I'd give a quote from the other article, and afterwards I'd give an explanation of why this shows that this article also thinks that students have to move back in after college. If I was doing a contrast paragraph, I might say they disagree on whose responsibility it is. This first little article says that it's up to the parents to set boundaries, but the second one says that it's up to the government. Then that is what I'm trying to prove, that they disagree about this, right? And so I would quote from the first article and say, my explanation would be showing where in this quote I'm seeing that this quote is saying that the first article says that it's the parent's responsibility. And then I'd give the second quote, and then I'd explain to my reader where in this quote I'm seeing that this quote shows that this person says it's not the parent's responsibility, it's the government's responsibility. So throughout your synthesis essay, you're going to practice a lot of the same skills that you were practicing on your rhetorical analysis, which are summary skills, having a strong thesis, having strong topic sentences, having specific examples, and also explaining your examples. What you have due tomorrow is basically an outline. I'm going to give you feedback as quickly as I can. Oh, I'm sorry, it was due today. Sorry. I'm going to give you feedback on your activities as soon as I can because I've been grading your essays. I'm a little bit behind. I'm going to give them back to you as soon as I can. But on Saturday, your job, after I've given you feedback and said, I think this would work well for a paragraph, I think this would work well for a paragraph, on Saturday, you're going to write an outline for your synthesis essay. And then you're going to pick one of the paragraphs you've outlined, and then you're going to write that paragraph. And the reason we're doing that is because I want you to succeed. I want you to show me what you plan to write, and then I want you to write one of them so that I know you understand what the topic sentence should look like and what the example should look like and how you explain the examples. So I'm going to spend the next 24 hours grading everything that I still haven't graded yet. I will try to get that back to you as quickly as I can, as early as I can tomorrow, hopefully before lunchtime. And then by Saturday, you're going to write an outline and write a paragraph. All of this to say, I want you guys to keep working on your summaries, keep working on your topic sentences, avoid phrases like they talk about this, they talk about that, right? Be more specific. What do they say about that thing that they're talking about, right? What are they arguing about that thing? And then I want you to work on your topic sentence example explanation structure. Not only is the essay for the synthesis very similar to the rhetorical analysis, but the rubric is very similar. So take a look at the rubric, study the categories, see what categories you didn't do as well on in this paper, and target those categories for the next paper. I promise you, no one is yet doomed except for the people who have literally never turned anything in. But those of you who are probably watching this video right now are not doomed. You can still get a very good grade in this paper, and I am still here to help you. This is around the time in the semester where students start despairing and feeling like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not cut out for college, maybe I'm a terrible writer. But that is not the case at all. Just because you're not getting something on the first try, and most of you have A's and B's, but if you're getting a B or even a C, that doesn't mean you're doomed. That means that you have room for improvement, and I'm here to help you do that. I'm here to help you improve and learn the skills that you need to be getting A's from here on out. That's why we're doing this class, okay? So let me know if you have any questions. Keep up the good work, and I will have your papers back to you as soon as I can, okay?